The blizzard was so powerful that even the royal wolves refused to enter it. But one woman did. Hours earlier, Seren had been banished from the kingdom with nothing but a torn cloak, condemned to die alone in the frozen mountains. No one expected her to survive the night. No one expected her to return. Then, beneath a fallen pine tree, the Alpha King discovered something that made his blood run cold. 12 missing royal pups were alive. They were curled around the frozen Omega, using their tiny bodies to keep her warm. But the strangest part wasn't that Seren had saved them. It was the silver mark glowing beneath her skin, the same ancient mark carried by the royal bloodline. And suddenly, the king realized the woman his kingdom had thrown away might be the one person destined to save it. The blizzard had already swallowed the Omega when the Alpha King found her. She was kneeling beneath a frozen pine, her thin body curled over 12 trembling wolf pups as the storm tore across the mountainside. Snow clung to her dark hair. Her lips had turned pale. One hand was wrapped around the smallest pup, while her other arm shielded 3 more from the cutting wind. Around her stood a circle of enormous royal wolves. Their fur was white with frost, their paws buried deep in the snow, their heads lowered toward the woman they had never seen before. And none of them would let the Alpha King's guards come closer. But only hours earlier, Seren had been walking out of the Silverpine kingdom alone. No guards followed her. No horse waited at the gate. No family member had come to say goodbye. She had been given one old wool cloak, a small leather pouch, and a command to never return. The palace gates closed behind her with a heavy sound that seemed to disappear beneath the rising wind. Seren stopped once. She looked back. Beyond the iron bars, the towers of Silverpine rose into the grey sky, their stone walls shining with frost. Smoke curled from hundreds of chimneys. Warm golden lights glowed behind palace windows. She could almost imagine the smell of bread from the kitchens. The sound of bells. The warmth of the servants' hall. The little corner beside the kitchen fireplace where she had slept for most of her life. Then the gates locked. Seren lowered her eyes. She had learned long ago that some doors were not meant to open for people like her. She turned toward the northern road. The first snowflakes struck her face. Within minutes, they became thousands. The northern pass was already disappearing beneath the storm. Every step became harder. Snow climbed over her boots. The wind pulled at the old cloak around her shoulders. She held it closed with one hand while the other pressed against her chest. She had not cried when the council accused her. She had not cried when High Chancellor Veyran stood before the throne and called her presence a curse. She had not cried when the guards removed the silver bracelet that marked her as a palace servant. But now, alone beneath the endless sky, her eyes burned. Not because she wanted revenge. Because she had spent so many years trying to be good, and somehow goodness had never been enough. The wind screamed through the trees. Seren kept walking. Behind her, Silverpine's bells began to ring. Not the evening bells. The emergency bells. 12 royal wolf pups were missing. The kingdom's most precious young heirs had disappeared during a winter patrol beyond the eastern forest. And Veyran had already made sure everyone knew who to blame. The Omega. The weak one. The unwanted one. The girl whose scent, he claimed, had frightened the sacred wolves. Seren had been nowhere near the pups when they disappeared. But no one had asked. No one had cared. She reached the northern pass just as the storm became almost impossible to see through. Then she heard something. A sound beneath the wind. So faint she almost believed she had imagined it. Seren stopped. The snow blew across her face. She listened. There. Again. A tiny sound. Not the wind. Not a branch. A whimper. Her heart began beating faster. She turned toward the forest. The safest thing would have been to keep walking. The safest thing would have been to find shelter before the storm killed her. But the sound came again. A small, frightened cry. Seren stepped off the road. Snow swallowed her boots. She pushed between the trees. Branches scratched her cheeks. The deeper she went, the quieter the world became. Then she saw them. Tiny paw prints. 12 sets. Fresh. Leading toward a steep ravine. Seren stared at the tracks. Her breath caught. She knew those markings. Every child in Silverpine did. Royal wolf pups. The missing heirs were alive. And they were somewhere inside the storm. Seren looked toward the road behind her. Then toward the ravine. For the first time since the palace gates had closed, something stronger than fear filled her chest. She stepped toward the tracks. I found you. The wind swallowed the words. But Seren kept walking. She had no idea that the choice she made in that moment would change the fate of an entire kingdom. And she had no idea that somewhere far behind her, the Alpha King had just learned that the woman he believed responsible for his children's disappearance had been banished into the same storm that was hiding them. The forest became darker as Seren descended. Snow covered everything. The branches bowed beneath its weight, and the ground disappeared beneath a thick white blanket. More than once, Seren slipped and caught herself against a tree. Her fingers were numb. Her breathing came in short clouds. Still, she followed the tracks. They led deeper into the ravine. Then she heard a cry. This time there was no doubt. Seren hurried forward. At the bottom of the ravine, a pine tree had fallen across a narrow shelf of rock. Beneath it, something moved. Seren dropped to her knees. 12 pairs of eyes stared back at her. The pups were trapped. A section of the tree had crushed the snow around them, while sheets of ice had formed over the opening. Their fur was soaked. Several were shaking violently. One pup tried to crawl forward. Its back leg dragged behind it. Seren's face tightened. Oh, little one. She reached toward it. The pup flinched. Seren pulled her hand back. She knew frightened animals did not understand kindness from strangers. So she sat in the snow. She removed one glove, placed it beside the opening, and waited. The pup watched her. The storm raged around them. Seren stayed still.
After a long moment, the injured pup crawled forward and pressed its nose against her bare fingers. Seren closed her eyes. Then she began working. She dug with her hands. Snow filled her sleeves. Ice cut her palms. The fallen branches were too heavy, but she found a broken length of wood and used it as a lever. Again and again. Her shoulders shook with effort. At last, the first opening widened. One pup squeezed through. Then another. Then another. Soon they were crawling over Seren's knees, shivering and exhausted. She counted them. 12. All 12. But the smallest one did not move. Seren reached beneath the branches. Her fingers found a tiny body. Cold. Far too cold. No. She pulled the pup against her chest. Its eyes were closed. Seren immediately wrapped it inside her cloak. The other pups gathered around her. She could not carry all of them easily. So she carried the injured one beneath one arm, held the smallest against her chest, and guided the others through the snow. The abandoned hunter's cabin was nearly a mile away. It took them more than an hour. By the time Seren reached it, her legs were trembling so badly she could barely stand. The cabin door hung from one broken hinge. Inside, the room smelled of old wood, ash, and damp stone. There was no fire, no food, almost nothing. But there was a roof. Seren pushed the pups inside. She found an old iron pot and filled it with snow. Then she searched through the cabin. Nothing. Her stomach twisted. She remembered the leather pouch the guards had given her. Inside were 3 dried roots and a little salt. That was all. Seren looked at the pups. Then she smiled faintly. That will have to be enough. She gathered broken branches from inside the cabin. Her hands were bleeding. She struck 2 stones together. Nothing. Again. A spark. Another. Then finally a small flame. Seren leaned close. Warmth touched her face. The pups slowly moved toward it. She tore strips from the bottom of her cloak and wrapped the injured leg. She melted snow, mixed it with the roots, fed tiny amounts to the pups. Then she sat beside the smallest one. The little body was still. Seren rubbed its ears. Come on. Nothing. She held it closer. Her own body was shaking with cold. But she did not care. She tucked the pup beneath her coat, pressed it against her heartbeat, and stayed there. Hours passed. Outside, the storm became a wall. Inside, Seren whispered nothing. She simply waited. At last she felt something, a tiny movement against her chest. The pup breathed. Seren's eyes filled with tears. She lowered her forehead against its tiny head. That's it. The smallest pup opened its eyes. 12 little bodies shifted closer to her. For the first time that night, Seren allowed herself to breathe. Far away, however, Silverpine was waking to a different kind of nightmare. King Caelan returned from the southern border shortly before midnight. The moment he entered the palace, he knew something was wrong. The halls were too quiet. Guards stood everywhere. His captain approached with a face drained of color. Caelan stopped. "Where are my children?" The captain lowered his head. "They're missing." The king stared at him. 12 royal pups. 12 heirs of the royal wolf line.
Gone.
Caelan's hand tightened around the edge of his cloak.
How?
No one answered. Then Veyran stepped forward. The chancellor's expression was perfectly controlled. "We believe the Omega Seren may have been involved." Caelan's eyes hardened. Seren. She was seen near the eastern kennels earlier today.
A lie.
But Caelan did not know that yet. "Where is she?" Veyran hesitated. "She has been banished." The king stared at him. "You banished a woman while my children were missing?" Veyran bowed. The council believed immediate action was necessary. For several seconds, Caelan said nothing. Then he turned toward the nearest guard. "Prepare my horse." The guard blinked. "My king, the storm. Prepare my horse." Within minutes, the royal wolves were assembled. Caelan rode north into the blizzard. He did not know where Seren was. He did not know where his children were. But somewhere beyond the mountains, a dying Omega sat beside 12 royal pups and fought the cold with everything she had. And before dawn, the two paths would finally meet. By sunrise, the fire inside the cabin had almost died. Seren was barely awake. Her body had become a heavy thing she could hardly move. Her fingers were swollen. Her lips were cracked. The cloak around her was no longer enough to keep out the cold. But the pups were alive. All 12. They were curled against her in a tangled circle of fur. The injured pup rested beside her knee. The smallest slept beneath her chin. Seren's eyes closed. For one moment, she thought she heard wolves outside. She smiled weakly. Of course. There were always wolves in the mountains. Then the howl came again. Closer. Much closer. The pups lifted their heads. Seren tried to sit up. She could not. Outside, snow exploded beneath running paws. Dozens of wolves appeared between the trees. At their center rode a black horse. A man dismounted. He wore a dark cloak covered in snow. His face was hard with cold and exhaustion. King Caelan. He had spent the entire night searching. Behind him came royal guards. One of them spotted the cabin. "My king." Caelan moved forward. The wolves surrounded the building. Then he saw something through the broken doorway.
A white pup. Then another. Then another. Seren froze. His heart stopped. He stepped inside. The smell of smoke reached him first. Then the scent of blood. Then his children. 12 royal pups looked up from around Seren. For a moment, Seren could not move. His youngest pup limped toward him. The king dropped to his knees. He gathered the animal against his chest. The pup licked his chin. Seren closed his eyes. A sound escaped him that no one in the kingdom had heard in years. Relief. Raw. Shaking. He held the pup tightly. Then his gaze moved toward the woman on the floor. Seren. She was unconscious. Her hair was frozen at the ends. Her hands were bleeding. Her body had curled around the smallest pup as though she had become a wall between it and the cold. Seren stared. This was the woman they had accused. The woman they claimed had harmed his children. Yet his children were alive because of her. One guard stepped forward. "Should we take the pups?" The largest royal wolf growled. Seren raised his hand. "No." The wolf's growl faded. Seren approached Seren. He touched her shoulder. Nothing. He pressed 2 fingers beneath her jaw. A pulse. Weak. But there. "Get blankets." The guards moved immediately. Seren lifted Seren into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Her head fell against his shoulder. The smallest pup whined. Caelan looked down. The pup struggled toward Seren. Easy. He lowered Seren onto a blanket. The pup crawled against her chest. The other 11 followed. Caelan watched in silence. Something was wrong. Not with the pups. With everything he had been told. He looked at Seren's torn sleeve. Beneath it, just above her wrist, was a faint silver symbol. Caelan's expression changed. He knew that mark. He had seen it only once. In an ancient royal manuscript locked beneath the palace. The mark of the Moonbound Guardian. A bloodline thought extinct for nearly 200 years. He pulled one pup closer. The same silver symbol shimmered beneath its fur. Then another. And another. All 12. Caelan looked back at Seren. The same mark. His heartbeat slowed. "This stays between us," he said. The captain nodded. No one understood why. But before they could leave, a sharp sound cut through the air. Thud. An arrow struck the cabin door. The royal wolves turned instantly. Another arrow flew. A guard fell. Caelan drew his sword. Shields. The forest erupted. Shapes moved between the trees. Men. Not wolves. Hunters. Someone was still trying to kill the royal heirs. Caelan pulled Seren behind him. The pups gathered together. The largest royal wolf stepped forward. Its teeth flashed. Then something strange happened. The wolves did not run toward the attackers. They surrounded Seren. Every single one. Their bodies formed a wall. Caelan stared at them. For years, the royal wolves had obeyed only one command. Protect the bloodline. Yet now they were protecting an Omega. An Omega who should have been a stranger. The attacks stopped as suddenly as they had begun. The enemy retreated into the storm. Caelan stood among the snow and broken branches. His eyes remained fixed on Seren. The woman everyone had condemned had just been protected by the royal wolves. And Caelan knew, with a certainty that frightened him, that whatever had happened in the eastern forest was far bigger than 12 missing pups. Caelan did not return to Silverpine. Instead, he led the group to an old mountain fortress hidden between two cliffs. The place had once belonged to the first kings of the northern wolves. Its towers were cracked. Its courtyard was covered in snow. But the walls were thick enough to survive the storm. Seren remained unconscious for 2 days. When she finally opened her eyes, she saw firelight, warm blankets, stone walls, and 12 pairs of eyes watching her. The smallest pup was sleeping beside her hand. Seren blinked. "You're alive." Her voice was barely a whisper. The pup stirred. Its nose touched her fingers. Seren smiled. Then she noticed the man standing near the fireplace. Caelan. He was watching her. Not like a king. Like a father who had almost lost everything. "You saved them," he said. Seren looked away. "I found them." "You saved them." She did not know what to say. So she looked at the fire. Caelan did not press her. He left the room. Over the following days, Seren recovered slowly. She learned the pup's habits. The injured one needed rest. The smallest needed warmth. 2 of the others refused to eat unless Seren sat beside them. Caelan noticed everything. He noticed how Seren woke before sunrise to check the animals. How she touched the firewood before placing it into the flames, choosing the driest pieces. How she never took the largest portion of food. How she always gave the pups the warmest blankets. He also noticed something else. The wolves calmed whenever Seren entered a room. Their ears relaxed. Their breathing slowed. Even the oldest royal wolf would lower its head when she passed. Caelan began searching the fortress archives. The records had been untouched for generations. One night, he found something. A stone carving beneath the eastern hall. Seren stood beside him holding a lantern. Dust floated through the golden light. On the wall was an image of a woman kneeling among wolves. Beneath her were 12 small figures. Seren lifted the lantern. Her face went pale. There was writing beneath the carving. She read it slowly. "The Guardian shall not seek the crown. The crown shall seek the Guardian." Soellen stared. Who wrote this? The First Kings. Why 12 wolves? Seren shook her head. I don't know. She moved the lantern closer. Then she saw the symbol. The same silver mark beneath her sleeve. Soellen's expression hardened. This is why Veyran wanted you gone. Seren looked at him. You think he knew? I think he knew enough to be afraid. The next morning, Soellen discovered that palace records had been changed. The patrol route had been altered. The kennel report had been rewritten. Most disturbing of all, Seren's banishment order had been signed before the pups disappeared. Soellen stared at the document. His fingers tightened around the paper. The order had been prepared in advance. Someone had planned to remove Seren before the pups were taken. And only one man had access to every record. Veyran. That night, the fortress gates shook. Once. Twice. Then the alarm bell rang. Seren grabbed the smallest pup. Soellen ran into the courtyard. Fire arrows flew over the walls. Men climbed the outer gates.
The royal guards rushed forward. The wolves scattered. Seren stood frozen. Then one pup ran toward her. Another followed. Then another. Within seconds, all 12 gathered around her. Their backs formed a circle. Their teeth bared. The largest wolf stood in front. Seren looked down. Silver light seemed to shimmer faintly beneath the pup's fur. Caelan saw it too. The attackers reached the courtyard. But before they could touch Seren, the royal wolves moved. Not wildly. Not like frightened animals. Together. As one. The first attacker fell. Then another. Caelan realized the truth. The pups were not merely attached to Seren. They had chosen her. And whatever ancient power slept within their blood had awakened. The fortress could not hold forever. Caelan knew it. By dawn, the outer gates were damaged, several guards were wounded, and more enemy riders had been spotted along the southern ridge. They had only one choice. Leave. Seren wrapped the smallest pup inside a thick blanket. Caelan saddled the horses. The royal wolves moved ahead. The journey into the mountains began beneath a sky the color of steel. Snow covered the trail. The wind carried ice through every gap in their clothing. Seren rode beside Caelan. For hours, neither spoke. Then the horse beneath Seren stumbled. Caelan reached for her reins. I have you. She steadied herself. I can manage. I know. He released the reins.
It was a small thing.
But Seren noticed. He had stopped treating her like someone who needed saving. He trusted her. That mattered more than he realized. By afternoon, they reached a narrow valley. Seren suddenly pulled her horse to a stop. Caelan looked back. What is it? She pointed toward the trees. Snow has fallen there recently. He frowned. So, the branches underneath are bent differently. She dismounted. She walked closer. Then she saw it. A hidden path. Not made by animals. By men. Fresh footprints disappeared beneath the snow. Caelan's face darkened. They followed the path. It led to a small stone shelter. Inside were supplies.
Food.
Weapons. Royal blankets. And a sealed chest. Caelan opened it. Inside were palace documents. Patrol maps. Orders bearing Veyran's seal. Seren stood beside him. One document described the plan. The pups had been deliberately moved away from their guards. The storm would hide the kidnapping. Then Veyran's men would discover the pups later. He would return them as a hero. The kingdom would trust him. And with the royal heirs under his control, he would eventually rule through them. Seren's hand covered her mouth. Caelan read the final page. His eyes became cold. He planned all of it. A sound came from outside. Horses. Many of them. Caelan shut the chest. We have to go. They ran. The mountains became a maze. Seren guided them around hidden ice fields. She found edible roots beneath the snow. She knew which branches would break beneath a horse's weight. She recognized the warning calls of mountain birds. Each time danger appeared, she noticed it first. Caelan watched her. The woman who had once believed she was weak was now guiding a king through the wilderness. At night, they rested beneath a rock overhang. The pups slept between them. The fire burned low. Caelan looked at Seren. You could have left them. She looked at the sleeping animals. I couldn't. You were dying. So were they. He was silent. Then he said quietly, You saved my family. Seren looked at him. I saved 12 frightened animals. They are my children. Her eyes softened. I know. Something changed between them. Not love yet. Not something either dared to name.
But trust.
Deep and quiet. The next morning, they descended towards Silverpine. Smoke rose from the valley. The kingdom was there. Home. But something was wrong. The outer gates were open. No banners moved. No guards stood on the walls. Caelan's horse slowed. Then a horn sounded from the city. Veyran's symbol appeared above the palace. Seren's heart sank. Caelan stared at the distant towers. Veyran had taken control. The king had returned. But the kingdom no longer belonged to him. The palace courtyard was filled with soldiers. Caelan entered through the main gate with Seren beside him. The 12 pups walked behind them. Royal wolves followed. The entire court gathered on the palace steps. At the center stood Veyran. He wore the crown of authority across his chest. His face was calm, almost pleased. My king, he said. Caelan dismounted. You betrayed me. Veyran smiled. You disappeared into a storm while your kingdom needed leadership. Caelan's hand moved toward his sword. Seren touched his arm.
He stopped.
Veyran noticed. His eyes moved toward her. The Omega. Seren stood straight. The same woman who had left the palace with nothing now stood beneath its towers again. Snow covered her cloak. A scar marked her palm. Her eyes were no longer lowered. Veyran raised his voice. She kidnapped the royal heirs. The court murmured. Caelan stepped forward.
No.
Veyran lifted a hand. She deceived you. Caelan's voice remained quiet. You altered the patrol routes. Veyran's smile disappeared. You forged Seren's banishment order before the pups disappeared. The chancellor said nothing. Caelan's captain stepped forward carrying the documents found in the mountain shelter. One by one, the evidence was placed before the council.
Maps.
Orders. Royal seals. Names.
Dates.
Everything connected to Veyran. But the chancellor still had one weapon.
Fear.
You have no proof that those papers are genuine. A silence fell. Then one of the 12 pups stepped forward. It walked across the courtyard.
Past the guards.
Past the council. Toward the old stone wall beneath the palace tower. Its claws scraped against the ground. It stopped.
Turned.
And looked directly at Seren. Seren understood. She followed. The pup pushed against a loose stone. The wall shifted. A hidden passage opened. The council gasped. Caelan stared. They entered. Behind the wall were the original palace records. The ones Veyran had tried to destroy. Seren's name appeared. The banishment order. The altered patrol route. The secret transfer of the pups. Every truth had been hidden there. Every lie had been exposed. Veyran backed away. For the first time, fear crossed his face. Caelan approached him. You accused an innocent woman. Veyran said nothing. You endangered my children. Still nothing. You tried to steal the crown. The king stopped inches away. And you failed. The guards seized Veyran. The council stripped him of every title. His seal was broken before the entire court.
The man who had once controlled Silverpine was led away without a single person following him. The courtyard slowly became quiet. Then the smallest pup ran toward Seren. She dropped to her knees. The animal climbed into her arms. One by one, the others followed. The royal wolves lowered their heads. The court watched. And for the first time, no one looked at Seren as an unwanted Omega. They looked at her as the woman who had saved the royal bloodline. Caelan approached. He stopped before her. You saved my children. Seren looked down. They saved me too. Caelan smiled. It was the first real smile anyone had seen from him in years. Then perhaps they knew what they were doing. Seren looked at him. He extended his hand. Not as a king giving an order. As a man offering a choice. You have a place here. She hesitated. I don't want a crown. I didn't offer you one. Her eyes lifted. I offered you a home. The words reached somewhere inside her that years of cruelty had left empty. Seren took his hand. The kingdom watched. The 12 pups gathered around them. Outside, snow began falling again. But this time, Seren did not fear it. Months passed. Winter slowly released the mountains. The frozen roads opened. The villages returned to life. Children played beside the river. Smoke rose from warm chimneys. And in the royal courtyard, the 12 pups grew. They became strong young wolves. Their silver markings remained. So did their bond with Seren. She never demanded a title. She never asked for a throne. But the people began calling her something anyway. The Guardian of Silverpine. 1 year later, the first snow of winter returned. Seren stood beneath the same old pine tree where she had once been found. Only now, she wore a warm cloak. Her hands were no longer scarred from the storm. 12 grown wolves surrounded her. The smallest pressed its head against her shoulder. Seren laughed softly. Across the courtyard, Caelan watched. He walked toward her. She turned. For a moment, neither spoke. The kingdom moved around them. Bells rang. Children laughed. Wolves howled beyond the walls. And snow settled gently across the stones. Caelan looked at the wolves. Then at Seren. Do you remember the night you left? Seren nodded. I thought I was walking toward the end of my life. Caelan's eyes softened. You were walking toward the beginning. Seren looked at the 12 wolves. Then at the palace. Then at the man who had once been a stranger. She smiled. Not because the past had disappeared, but because it no longer controlled her. The woman Silverpine had once called worthless had become the heart of its royal family. The Omega they had sent into a deadly blizzard had returned with 12 missing heirs. She had not conquered the kingdom. She had not taken revenge. She had simply refused to let 12 frightened lives disappear beneath the snow. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything. The 12 wolves lifted their heads together. Their howls rose into the winter night. Seren stood among them. Safe. Loved. Home. And for the first time in her life, when the palace gates closed behind her, she knew they were not shutting her out. They were protecting the home she had finally found.